Tracking down the ousted president, South Africa is to issue a statement on its involvement in the Central African Republic. Insignificant compensation. Kenyan victims of UK colonial-era atrocities unhappy with the payout announced yesterday. And on the mend, Libya's Prime Minister is calling for unity as reconstruction efforts in the country take shape. Hello there, welcome to Africa Live, CCTV's new program that brings you African and global news from all perspectives. I'm Ramanyang in Nairobi, Kenya, 1000 GMT. Here's what we have lined up for you over the next 30 minutes. Liberalizing African skies. We'll have the latest on the debate on the way forward for African aviation. And Justin Gatling upsets the Olympic champion Usain Bolt in the Rome Diamond League. Now, there have been conflicting reports about the exact whereabouts of the former president of the Central African Republic. South Africa has denied reports that Francois Bozize had landed there. Its Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Clayson Wanyala, said he did not know where those reports were coming from. Now, earlier this week on Tuesday, an aide to Bozize said the deposed leader was in Nairobi, Kenya, en route to South Africa. Bozize's spokesman later said, however, he had left Cameroon on a private visit, quote-unquote. The 66-year-old leader fled from the Central African Republic to Cameroon after rebel coalition seized power on the 24th of March. His country has since issued an international arrest warrant against him for charges of kidnapping, murder, crimes against humanity, as well as economic crimes. We're now joined by CCTV's René Delcam on the phone for the latest on this story. René, the Foreign Affairs Ministry in South Africa was scheduled to issue a statement on the country's involvement in the Central African Republic. Now, we also know that Pretoria has denied reports that the ousted Central African Republic's president, Francois Bozize, is in the country. Is that position likely to change, and what should we be expecting from the briefing?
Excuse me, if you don't mind, would you please repeat the question? I could not hear you.
Right. René, essentially what we're looking at here is a situation where the South African government, of course, has denied that reports that the ousted Central African Republic President Francois Bozize is in the country. Is that position likely to change, and what should we expect from the briefing today?
Well, as I said a minute ago, I just cannot hear you, but I suspect that you're asking me about whether or not former president of the CAR, Francois Bozize, is in South Africa. The South African International Relations Minister addressed that just a few minutes ago, and she said, once again, the answer was no. She said that he had requested a visa from South Africa, and before that request could be considered.
Well, it does seem that we have lost René Delcam there on the line from Pretoria, South Africa. We'll try and clean up that line and get back to it later on when we can. So then, who exactly is Francois Bozize and why does he matter? Well, this individual was born in 1946. He then rose to become a fairly high-ranking army officer in the 70s under the rule of the then leader of the Central African Republic, Jean Bedel Bokassa. After Bokassa was ousted from power, Bozize served in the government as Minister of Defense from 1979 to 1981 and then as Minister of Information from 1981 to 1982. He participated as well in a failed coup attempt in 1982 against President Andre Kolingba and subsequently fled the country. Now, years later, he started a rebellion against the CAR's then president, Ange Felix Patasse, in 2001. In March 2003, Bozize took power, ushering in a transitional period of government. He won the March-May 2005 presidential elections and was re-elected in January 2011 when elections were held at that time. In December 2012, rebel forces condemned the Bozize government for not honouring peace agreements after the Central African Republic bush war in 2007. In March 2013, Bozize then fled to Cameroon after the rebel forces attacked the capital city of Bangui and took control of the presidential palace. Now, for more details on this continuing story, we're now joined live by CCTV's Guy Henderson, who's live in South Africa. Guy, what exactly has been South Africa's interest in the Central African Republic?
Well, South Africa's involvement with the Central African Republic has, particularly in the last few months, been shrouded in quite a lot of controversy. Ever since those Seleka rebels advanced on the capital, Bangui, to oust the former president, Francois Bozize, those advancing rebels somehow found themselves engaging in a firefight of some sort with a small contingent of South African troops who were stationed on the outskirts of Bangui. Now, that led to all sorts of questions and scrutiny about why South Africa had this troop presence there, why they had this apparently bilateral agreement with Francois Bozize's government to have those troops there, completely separate from the any international peacekeeping mission that was there. And it led to allegations from a national newspaper here that there could have been a motivation for deploying them there to protect certain business interests of certain influential South African political figures and business figures. Now, that's something that the South African government has always stringently denied, although there is this argument that Mr. Bozize somehow got it in his head that those troops were there to protect even if they weren't in fact there for that purpose. Regardless, it does look as though Mr. Bozize once again seems to think that he's found a friend in South Africa. Whether he's here or not yet, it does look as though he is on his way or trying to make his way here.
Right, well, let's move into the realm of theory here a bit. Is South Africa likely to accommodate Francois Bozize if he does request asylum from the South African government?
Well, we were hearing some of that briefing from my colleague Renee Delcam, but unfortunately she got cut off, so we'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out exactly what came out of that press briefing. But from the various academics and various analysts on this situation who I've spoken to this morning, they're telling me that it is likely that he will eventually be let in. Two main reasons. Firstly, that the authority in Central African Republic is still seen by many African countries as a transitional authority that's not yet fully recognised by the African Union. And secondly, the government here may argue that Mr. Bozize may face persecution by that transitional authority if he was to return to Central African Republic, and that he wouldn't necessarily stand a fair trial. Just to quickly also address, there were initial reports that this arrest warrant, by being international, could fall under the scope of the International Criminal Court. From what I'm hearing, yes, it is an international arrest warrant but at the same time, it has only been issued domestically. So it is a domestically issued arrest warrant by this transitional authority in Central African Republic. So it looks as though what may have happened is that while Cameroon is a neighbour of Central African Republic, and it may have been very sensitive for Mr. Bozize to remain there, well, if he left, he therefore has left there, but is now heading to South Africa, which is a little bit further away and perhaps a little bit less sensitive.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Guy Henderson. He was live over in South Africa, giving us the latest details concerning the briefing that we're expecting to hear fairly shortly around this hour or so from the South African Foreign Affairs Ministry concerning some key events there, especially around the expected arrival, some would argue, of Francois Bozize. Let's move on to East Africa now, where Britain is to pay over $30 million in compensation to Kenyans tortured by colonial forces during the Mau Mau uprising in the 1950s and the 1960s. The British government has also expressed regret for those abuses. With the details, here's CCTV's Richard Bestick.
Statement. The Foreign Secretary.
They were words never heard before in this place, the old imperial power apologising to its victims.
The British government recognises that Kenyans were subject to torture and other forms of ill treatment at the hands of the colonial administration. The British government sincerely regrets that these abuses took place and that they marred Kenya's progress towards independence. Torture and ill treatment are abhorrent violations of human dignity, which we unreservedly condemn.
Those abuses date back more than 50 years to what the British government at the time called the Kenyan Emergency. The Mau Mau uprising from 1952 triggered a brutal response from the British colonial authorities. Around 150,000 people were rounded up, tens of thousands killed, many others tortured and maimed. Half a century or so later, 3 Kenyans travelled to Britain to tell their story to the High Court and won the right to sue the British government. The British opted to settle out of court. Now, more than 5,200 Kenyans have secured compensation and something more. Recognition of their suffering will be marked by the construction of a permanent memorial in Nairobi, to be paid for by the British.
Although we should never forget history and indeed must always seek to learn from it, we should also look to the future, strengthening a relationship that will promote the security and prosperity of both our nations. I trust that this settlement will support that process, the ability to recognize error in the past, but also to build the strongest possible foundation for cooperation and friendship in the future are both hallmarks of our democracy.
Lawyers for the victims said this was a day they never thought they'd see.
I'm totally delighted on behalf of my client. It was the most magnificent moment to hear him giving the apology, to hear him making the announcement about the compensation. In many ways, I thought we'd never see this day.
This matter has been about much more than simply money. For Britain, it's a significant moment, coming to terms with the brutalities of its imperial past, making apologies and recompense, and building for a future based on friendship on equal terms. Richard Bestick, CCTV, London.
The decision by the British government to compensate thousands of Kenyans, 5,200 to be exact, who were tortured or mistreated by colonial Ido administrators 6 decades ago, drew varied and plenty of reactions back here in Kenya. Now, while the survivors of the atrocities welcomed the British expression of regret, the $20 million package for many can never adequately compensate them for their immense suffering at the hands of their colonial masters. CCTV's Jen Keo now reports.
Naomi Nzula carries the scars of colonial atrocity. She was just 27 when she was seized by colonial security forces, separated from her 3 children and her husband.
We were traveling in a bus when we were stopped. Men were separated from women.
Worse was to come. She was sexually abused so badly she lost the child she was carrying, and so badly she lost the ability to ever have more.
I was forced to have children through other women. It's too painful to talk about it.
She's among the 5,200 Kenyans due to benefit from the British payouts. The Kenya Human Rights Commission says the apology and payouts are symbolic.
Today's celebration is a true testimony to the fact that all those who commit serious human rights violations, regardless of their standing or position in society, or their might among the nations of the world, must be held to account for their actions.
But after legal fees, the compensation works out at less than $4,000 each, little to show for a lifetime of trauma.
I am not happy that for my children and husband, what is 300,000 shillings?
I asked her what she expected. She says at least 16 million Kenyan shillings or $200,000. Others say they'll accept the money and the long overdue apology.
We have accepted what the British government has done, but is it enough? No, it isn't. We were arrested and tortured for years, and the $3,000 won't be enough for us, our parents, or any other victim.
I can't refuse because I didn't have the money. Plus, it's a start. This will go a long way in supporting us.
Well, the concession by the British government brings to a closure a dark chapter in its colonial history and opens the path and channels of healing of historical wounds that have festered for 6 decades now. Jane Keo, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Raises some interesting questions about the limit of the market, doesn't it? Well, time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up next. On the mend, Libya's Prime Minister is calling for unity as reconstruction efforts take shape in the country. We'll have the latest when we return.
Breaking news. Global trends. CCTV News brings you stories with the different aspects of Africa in the international content. With our reporters across Africa and all over the world, we'll tell you about the real Africa and how it impacts the world. Africa Live, every day, only on CCTV News.
At 10:15 GMT, you're watching Africa Live. Libya's Prime Minister Ali Zaidan has called for national unity as his country struggles to get back on its feet after almost 2 years of political instability. Zaidan said it's only through unity that Libya will be able to fast-track its reconstruction process. With the details, here's CCTV's Susan Mongeli.
Insecurity has been a major challenge in Libya's reconstruction process. Protracted local conflicts have made it difficult for the transitional government to concentrate investment in national construction and development. Prime Minister Ali Zaidan acknowledged that the security situation was worrying as it discouraged foreign investment.
The government is facing an increased challenge in dealing with militias and unwarranted demonstrations throughout the country. This and many other incidents are costing the country a lot. I'm requesting that our citizens stop disputes and solve their problems in a rational manner, so together we can build the nation.
Zaidan, however, said the government was working with the National Congress to put up measures to promote foreign investment. He said this would only work if Libya guaranteed a safe and secure environment for foreign investors.
We must reopen projects that shut down before the war. The government is working with foreign companies and enterprises to negotiate their reopening. Almost 90% of these companies say they will come back if the security situation in Libya returns to normal.
Libya is currently struggling to get back to its feet, and its citizens will be hopeful of a speedy transition process to unlock its economic potential. Susan Mongeli, CCTV.
Over in West Africa, Nigeria's military reported on successes in its ongoing campaign against the Boko Haram militants. The crackdown has been rolled out in parts of the northeastern end of the country, where troops are mounting their biggest offensive yet against the Islamist extremists. Peter Okabe reports.
Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan declared an emergency in Borno, Yobe and Adamawa states on the 14th of May. Thousands of troops were deployed and airstrikes on suspected Islamist camps mounted. The military spokesman Chris Olukolade says the campaign is yielding the desired results.
Anyone that was killed in a camp cannot call himself a civilian. And most of the camps are populated definitely by terrorists, and they are the objects of this operation.
The general said urgent action was necessary in order to preserve the territorial integrity of the West African country.
Everyone who is carrying arms illegally in this country is a terrorist. Call them by whatever name. And the operation is aimed at ensuring that no such activity of terrorism takes place within the territory of Nigeria. It's our time to assert the territorial integrity of Nigeria as a country.
Babajida Mohammed, deputy head of the Keronawa community, says he is pleased that sanity has returned to his community after the military intervention.
We have suffered very much with this Jamaatul Ahl Sunnah, who's called Boko Haram. They treated us badly. So now we are very happy, and we want you people to inform Mr. President that we are innocent people. These troops, they come from outside. They are not our indigenous peoples.
President Jonathan declared the Islamist Boko Haram and splinter group Ansaru to be terrorist organizations, meaning anyone who supports them could face a 20-year jail sentence. Peter Wakaba, CCTV.